next?
Yes, you're right. I was skipping ahead. I was trying to make the evening shorter, people. We do have public hearings for the classification of taxable property to establish tax rates for FY18. So a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye. So, Paul, the floor is yours. And whoever else you want to bring from the assessors.
Good evening. It's our annual classification hearing. The objective tonight is Board of Selectmen to either adopt a single tax rate, a split rate, or a single tax rate with small commercial exemption, which is what the board has been doing for a number of years. Just a little bit of a rundown. Real and personal property values were adjusted this year, as we do every year for the interim revaluation. Property values, total property value-wise, in town has gone up almost 5% from last year, and that's based on sales. And as we move forward, new growth this year, a little bit disappointing. We've had a lot less, probably the lowest amount of growth that we've had in probably over 7 or 8 years. But again, things are looking better towards the future. We do have a lot of projects coming due. Within the next couple of years, that should be pretty significant in terms of our growth. The total value of all taxable real and personal properties this year is well over $4.6 billion. Our tax levy is over $75 billion, and so with that, the indicated single tax rate this year is $16.18, which is actually 23 cents lower than it was last year. But even though the tax rate is lower than last year, taxes are going up. The average single-family home this year went up to $520,000. It's up from almost $491,000 last year. So this year, that average taxpayer will see about $366 increase in their tax bill for FY18. And part of that is that the override is also hitting this year's tax levy. And again, the median assessed value has also gone up from last year. The median assessed value is $503,000. Last year was about $480,000. The option here is also a split tax rate. The split tax rate shifts some of the tax burden over to commercial, industrial, and personal properties. Personal properties being our businesses in town. And that shift can be anywhere from up to 50%. The ratio of residential to the CIP hasn't really changed much in probably the last 18 years. We pretty much average 85–86% residential, and the rest goes to the commercial, industrial, and personal properties. If there were to be a shift in the tax rate, it's kind of looking at what would a meaningful shift be, you'd probably have to look at probably 10% or better. At 10%, the residential taxpayer would see a slight decrease of about $135. That'd be the average, on the average single-family value. However, when you do that kind of a shift to the average commercial, I almost said the average commercial value, commercial property of equal value, that same $520,000, would see an increase in their tax bill of about $843. And that's because of a 10% shift, because we're shifting 10% of the 86% of the residential value over. The small commercial exemption has been applied by Board of Selectmen since 2003. And what it does, it shifts the tax burden within the commercial class from properties under $1 million to those commercial properties over $1 million. So we're not raising any more money, we're just shifting that burden for the commercial properties. Industrial properties pay the higher rate, they don't get any benefit from that, and personal properties with small businesses in town are not affected by it at all. So if you do the shift, we have done a 10% shift since 2003. That would create a tax rate for the small commercial exemption at $16.38. So those properties under $1 million, their assessment would be reduced by 10% and then taxed at the higher tax rate. And everything else would remain the same. So kind of moving through quickly, nothing earth-shattering or different has come up. So if there are any questions, now would probably be a good time to take those.
Mark?
Okay, thanks. Well, I have a few. What, when do we have to make this decision by, out of curiosity?
Well, we want to get our rates certified in final certification, and we're pretty much ready to do that tomorrow, which means we will probably be certified by, hopefully by Thanksgiving. Otherwise, your next meeting would be
11/28.
Right, so that's my when do we need to have this done by? 'Cause
sooner.
some of these questions might require a follow-up, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, sooner, because again, there's still a process of getting finalized with the Department
We
of
need
Revenue
to have it done
certified.
by?
I would say 11/28 would be the drop
Yeah,
dead.
okay, yeah.
Okay. So, what communities in Middlesex or in the Valley have commercial split rates?
I haven't looked in recent years. Chelmsford does not, although they are considering that. I believe
Littleton does. have a
Littleton
split.
does, obviously Lowell does. I'm not sure about Tewksbury or, you know, because
So
the
is that
smaller
something
towns
I can
do
get a
not.
follow-up on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does Dracut have a split tax rate? For some reason.
I'm not positive about Drake, but we
Some reason
can,
that
we can
sticks
get,
in my head too.
you're talking about the kind of local communities, is
Yeah.
that what you're asking?
Yep.
Okay.
On this, the, commercial, so I'm a little confused on the slide, the, small commercial exemption, the first slide in that grouping. We talked about there's 271 commercial properties and 239 of them are $1 million and less. But then the second bullet talks about there are 64 commercial properties over $1 million. So I'm just trying to understand the math.
Well, that also includes mixed-use properties, mixed-use residential, commercial, or industrial commercial as well. So those are also added into the number. So they're not clean commercial properties.
Okay. So it says there are 271, and then there's 239 that are million, that are under $1 million. So that would leave 32 that are over $1 million, but that second bullet says 64.
Not that one.
Not this slide, the,
Yeah.
one more previous. Keep going, previous.
No, up.
10,
Up.
slide 10.
No, that's not it. I don't have numbers on my slides here.
So, I'm just trying to understand, so you say the commercial tax base is comprised of 271 commercial properties. There are 239 commercial and mixed use that are under $1 million. That's 32 different, in theory would be over $1 million, but your second bullet says 64. So I'm just trying to understand.
Well, I'll have to go and review all those numbers. But again, first of all, there's the commercial class, and there are a certain number of parcels in those. But then, because of the small commercial exemption, we also have to look at and add in, because mixed-use properties, if there's commercial on those mixed uses, they are also impacted by small commercial exemption.
Okay, so maybe if, just as another follow-up, just try to understand that math there. And then, is it possible to do a split tax rate with a small commercial exemption?
Yes, there's probably 3 or 4 other communities in the state that do it.
Okay. And, can you, if that is an option, can you also lay out what the increase would be per 1,000, per 100,000, per million, whatever way you want to do it, if we did a split with the commercial exemption? So the reason, so some of it is just clarifying points for me.
Can I just, before you go, so I understand your last question is you want him to do a breakout of a split between residential and commercial, and then within the commercial, for the small business exemption within that?
Right, so what would be the 3 rates?
So the 3 rate, okay,
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure I understood, thank you.
So, and the reason I'm asking is, I am probably one of the last people who would want businesses to pay more taxes. But I'm also a little bit starting to get concerned about the consumption of, particularly public safety and highway, that commercial businesses, principally along 110, are consuming, just because of the sheer volume. So I'm just trying to understand, from a resident's perspective, the benefit of a decrease from doing this, and then what the financial implication is to the 2 kinds of commercial property, so that's why I'm asking this. And I'd like, before I form an opinion.
Yeah,
either way.
understandably, when you split the tax rate, that means commercial properties, industrial, they're gonna be paying substantially more.
Understand.
And even with the small commercial exemption, those smaller commercial properties will get a little bit of a break, but they'll still be paying more.
Yeah, yeah, just trying to understand what that is and the implications it has to residents who are financing an awful lot of things we're doing in town already versus the businesses, so.
Okay.
Any other questions? Tom?
Just, I see we've got a number of people from the Westford Economic Development Committee here. We have a number of members of the Westford Economic Development Committee here. If we're coming back to this issue, maybe it'd be interesting to, maybe on the meeting that I know is scheduled for Thursday, this could be discussed. I'd be interested in your recommendation.
Your meeting when?
Meeting Thursday morning at 8:15.
Pretty sure I know what the recommendation is, and if I had a business in town, it would be the exact same.
Well, it's the interesting analysis is the competitiveness. So the reason, I know
Right,
you
which
asked
is
for the
why I
data
asked
and we'll
about
get
it,
it,
yeah.
so, but I think there's a reason that the 110, the communities that we compete with most often are set up in a certain way, and we've, I think, historically reflected that. But we'll have all that data when it comes back.
Yeah, and just be clear, it's not just 110, it's the Merrimack Valley that I'd like to see the competitive.
Other questions? So I'll have one. I know, Paul, when you've come in past years, you've had data on the vacancy rates and of various classes of commercial property. If it's possible to get that as well. I think one reason why we had the split commercial rate originally was because of the vacancy rates amongst some of the office condos that we'd want to become even less competitive than we may have been. So might be worth looking at that data as well in the context of
Yep.
of weighing
That,
this.
that data tends to be a little limited, but, you know, I mean, yes, I mean, there are some of the larger buildings that have had vacancies, especially in Tech Park. Some of the smaller office condos, it kind of runs the gamut.
So what I'm hearing is you want to have a continuance of this until 11/28 at 7:35 again?
Sure.
Sure.
You need a motion?
Motion to that effect?
So
Nice.
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So I guess we'll see you again in 2 weeks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.